You can turn your video off. Otherwise, welcome everybody to our Gifts of the Cottonwood Tree event. We have a special guest with our Lower Phalen Creek staff project tonight. Jim Red Eagle, who I mentioned earlier, will be here about halfway through the program tonight. He'll be joining us by Zoom from South Dakota. And so we're really excited to be talking to you guys about this program. So first, I'm gonna introduce myself a little bit and who I am. We'll introduce our staff and talk about what we do here at Lower Phalen Creek Project. And then I'll explain a little bit about why we wanted to do this event focusing specifically on the cottonwood tree. So first of all, Hamitakuyepi, Maggie Lorenza Makiapie, Dakota, and my name is Maggie Lorenz. I am Dakota and I am also Ojibwe. I'm from Spirit Lake and Turtle Mountain, and I'm the executive director here for Lower Phalen Creek Project. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit on the east side of St. Paul. And our work really centers around environmental education and stewardship for a lot of the green spaces here on the east side, which include a lot of culturally significant resources and sites for our Indigenous communities here in Minnesota. So with that, I will hand it off to some of our other program staff so they can introduce themselves. Michela, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Michela Bowman, and I am Sisituan Kalachpetuan Dakota on my mom's side, and on my dad's side, my relatives actually came here from Scotland. And I grew up over South Minneapolis and just have always loved and had deep relations with our plant relatives, and especially the waterways that we have here in Minnesota. But I am our communications and events coordinator for Lower Phalen Creek Project. I started back in 2019, and it started off as an internship and now is a full-time position. So I do everything from our social media, newsletter, websites to help coordinate most of our events. And I'm so excited to see so many relatives here, so many familiar faces. It's going to be a really great night. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the gifts of the cottonwood tree in terms of medicine and food. Yeah, so I'm just really excited and really grateful to be here. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure, thank you, Michela. My name is Sam Wagner. I'm Lower Phalen Creek Project's Environmental Stewardship Program Manager. And as one of the only non-native folks on staff, I really can't say enough how fortunate I feel to be a part of this work. As someone who also grew up in the Twin Cities and also thought that I had some really great relations with the land and the waterways, I think I didn't realize until I was an adult how much missing the connection to Dakota communities and to Indigenous people all across the Twin Cities really is like a missing piece in terms of how to relate to this area. So I feel so lucky to be able to create that experience for young people, for adults, for pretty much all the members of our community here on the east side. A lot of my work handles our habitat restoration projects at Wakantipi, also known as Bruce Fento Nature Sanctuary. And obviously we have quite a lot of cottonwoods on site, and they are a big part of the floodplain ecosystem here along the Mississippi River Valley. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Keely.
Oha, Hamitakuyepi, Keely Shiaka, Makiapie, and Yushkian Wachiakapi. My name is Keely Shiaka. I'm happy to see you all here today. I'm the environmental justice educator and organizer at Lower Phalen Creek Project. I'll be developing an EJ policy for our organization and also making sure our community is heard with key projects and developments that are happening on the east side. I also forgot to mention I'm also from the Sistinwaptan and have some ancestry from Red Lake, Ojibwe. I've been with Lower Phalen Creek Project now for just over a month this week. I'm just really excited to be a part of the team and all the great work that's happening here.
Washte, thank you guys for introducing yourself. Those are our staff members who are here on the call to present tonight, but our elder is here as well. And so he arrived a little earlier than I thought he was going to, so this is great. So he's here now, and Jim Red Eagle, would you want to introduce yourself?
I can't see myself yet. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we can see you.
Okay. Okay, I can't see myself. Jim Red Eagle, Gabi. Na koja Gabi, Wamni Natabana. My Indian name is Charging Eagle. I'm Dakota and Dakota, and I was just speaking Dakota with you. Do you want me to go ahead and talk right now, or just introduce myself?
Yeah, if you just wanted to do the introductions, I'm gonna do a little bit of a intro to our program here, and then we'll have you talk about your stories about the Cottonwood.
All right, yeah. Basically, that's just that I'm gonna share about the Cottonwood is what I said, and my English name is Jim Red Eagle. My Indian name is Charging Eagle. I'm from Carry the Kettle, Saskatchewan, Dakota Reserve, and I'm from the Long Lodge band, our band was amalgamated into Carry the Kettle when my grandfather passed away. So that's kind of my history. But Red Eagle is a Dakota name, anyways, glad to be here and excited to share.
Washte.
I can't see myself, so I don't know if I'm slouching or.
Well, we can see you. So we'll get started here, and I'll just talk a little bit, like I said, about first, I think, what's on the next slide here, Michaela? I think it's going to be about our webinar protocols, or am I talking about our organization next? There we go, webinar guidelines. So as we kind of move through the program here, we're just going to ask people to keep their mics on mute through the webinar so that we can hear the speakers who are talking and sharing what they came to share tonight. And if you are able, you can turn your camera on. Again, this is being recorded, so if you're not comfortable with that, you can leave them off. But if you're able and interested to turn your camera on, we would love to see everybody who we're talking with. That would be great, so we can really get that feeling that we're all together here. And also the third guideline we have is the wo'ohora, which is having respect for these teachings and stories and the storytellers and elders we've asked to come here. And so we ask that if you're non-native and joining this event, to just sit with the knowledge that's been given and reflect on that. And if you have a question, just to give it a little bit of thought about what might be appropriate or not appropriate to ask, or why that question is coming up. So those are just some things we wanted to bring out before we started the webinar, but I'll talk to you a little bit about the program tonight and what we're going to go over. So let's see. I don't want to skip ahead to what's not on the next slide.
You're good. The next slide is just Keely's part.
Gotcha. Okay. So, well, I'll just talk to y'all a little bit about myself again and our organization. So like I said, I'm the executive director for Lower Phalen Creek Project. And what we do here is a lot of east side restoration work we've been doing for about 20 years on the east side of St. Paul. And so there are a number of parks and green spaces that we work in, including Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary, which is the home for, within that 27 acres is a place we call Wakantipi, which means the dwelling place of the sacred. This is a Dakota sacred site that is right here in this urban area. And it's a cave. And this place has been gone through a lot of colonization and desecration to the site, unfortunately. And what we're trying to really do is restore the area as best as we can and provide some protections and stewardship and care for that place. Adjacent and right next to that cave site is the burial mounds at Indian Mounds Regional Park. And we know that today there are 6 burial mounds that are still visibly remaining, but we know that there were at least 50 burial mounds up on that bluff. And so we also work in that space. We're partners with the city of St. Paul on these for these sites and really trying to look at how we can develop some cultural landscape practices, how we can manage and maintain these sites in a good way for the into the future, and extending even beyond Wakantipi and the burial mounds. Really the entire east side here is historic Kapoja village of the Bedawaktuan Dakota community. And so our work is to really try to restore as much as we can of these green spaces to their native way that these places have always been, to reconnect Dakota people to these places and their homelands and the stories and knowledge around these traditional native plants and their uses. And so this webinar came up tonight because in our work that we do, of course, we interact with a lot of other organizations who do land management for these places and restoration work. And Michaela and myself, Keely and Sam, we were really kind of shocked a little bit to hear that in some areas of these circles, people consider cottonwoods a junk tree. And that was just so surprising to us. And so in our culture, Dakota culture, we really consider this to be a sacred tree, a medicine tree. And so we wanted to pull this program together tonight to share with all of our Dakota relatives who maybe don't know all of these things about the gifts that this tree has to offer, and also to the larger community, why this tree is so special. So that's kind of why we wanted to have this program tonight. But we're going to start off actually with a video from a woman who is just a treasure in our community. Her name's Mary Louise Defender Wilson. And Mary is an elder who was born in North Dakota, where she lives at the Standing Rock Reservation, who is primarily Dakota Sioux, though she does have a grandmother who is Hidatsa, and her tribal name is Wagamuhawi, which is Gourd Woman. And Mary is a storyteller, a traditionalist, a scholar, and an educator, and has won numerous honors and awards for her work. But this video that we're going to share is off of her spoken word album, My Relatives Say. And this was released in 2001. This earned a Native American Music Award for the best spoken word recording. And she shares a lot of traditional stories on this album. So we really wanted to share this beautiful story of the star in the cottonwood tree. So I think, Michaela, if you want to share that. And I'm not sure if y'all saw, there we go. On the home slide, that little star in the cottonwood tree. If you take the branch or a stick, you can see that there's a little star design inside of that cottonwood tree. So this video that we're going to share with you is this traditional story about how that star got to be there.
Who was very interested time ago, a long time ago, when everything was still new. Up in the sky were all these stars. Amongst them was this little star who was very interested, curious about everything. This little star traveled across the sky, would stop and examine so many things. One day, this little star came down to Earth. It traveled all around the Earth, looking at all the animals, all the birds, all the plants, just everything that was alive. One day, it came near this village. There was a sound coming from this village that was so beautiful and so wonderful. The little star could not believe it. It stayed close to this village. It had never heard anything so beautiful in all of the heavens and all of the places it went to around the earth. So it stayed close to this village, listened and listened, and just couldn't get enough of hearing that beautiful sound. One day it got to thinking, I am a star and I'm supposed to be up there in the sky with the other stars. I had better go back. So it went back up into the sky and was with the other stars. But it began to think about this beautiful sound it had heard coming from that village. And it thought, I would like to go back and hear it some more. Then it began to get very lonesome. It began to feel very sad. So when the stars were talking about different things, the little star asked them if it could go back and live near that village so it could hear that beautiful sound. The star said, no, you are a star and you belong up here in the sky. So it didn't say anything. It tried to be involved in all the things that stars do, shining up in the sky, moving here and there. But it got so lonely. It went back to the stars again and said, I am so lonesome and I feel so bad. I want to go and stay near that village forever to hear that sound. The stars said, you cannot do that because those are people. They have things that they have to do in order to stay alive. They have work to do. They have to gather food. They have to build their houses. They have to look after their children. They have to make their clothes. And they have to live. And if you are close by there, shining around, they will all be looking at you. You will disturb their lives, and they will not get along very good. So you can't do that. So the little star thought and thought, and finally then said to the other stars, if I can find a way to be close to that village without them seeing me, can I stay there? And they said, yes, if you can find a way to stay there without disturbing the people, then you can go. So it went close to that village and it looked around and it saw this tree, a cottonwood tree growing close to the village. And the star said, I will stay inside that tree where I can hear that beautiful sound that comes from that village. And that sound was the sound of the people, the women, the men, the children, laughing and saying all these good words to each other. And the star still is in that cottonwood tree, hoping to hear those beautiful sounds.
Oh, I just love that story. And I love the way she tells it. It's just gets me all emotional every time I hear that story. So I just really wanted to share that with you all to understand one of our traditional stories about this tree and how that little star got in there, how that little star design got into that tree. But I want to turn it over now to our elder here, Jim Red Eagle, and he's going to talk a bit about some of the stories and the role that the cottonwood tree has for Dakota and Lakota people, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota. So Jim is Dakota, Nakota, and he's a men's traditional dancer and a storyteller, and also just a really highly esteemed and respected elder in our community. So we're really happy that he's able to be here with us tonight. So Jim, it's about 6:30 now. So we were going to give you about 30 minutes to share anything that you have to share with us. So that would be about 7 o'clock. So at your time, about 6 o'clock. So if that sounds good, you can take it away. I think you're still on mute.
How about now?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. Not very technically good with the computer. I could use a cell phone. I heard that story too, and really appreciate the way she tells it. The cottonwood tree to us has different names. Wagacha is one name, and I just kind of made some notes to keep me on track so I don't go rambling all over the place, and kind of stick to that. With the star, one of the names we call ourselves is Wichahukake. What that means is we are the relatives whose ancestors live in the star world. I don't know if you've heard the story about falling star woman, falling star boy, and there's actually was a falling star girl. Anyways, because of that, we believe that our spirit comes from the stars. So we relate that to the star in the cottonwood tree, which is, we consider it a sacred tree. Another name for it is a chawaka. Chawaka is what they call it at Sundance, during the Sundance ceremony. And I'll get into why that tree is used. And anyways, Wagacha means to take off the wood or the outer bark. It used to be used in times of hard winter we could feed our horses the bark, and they could thrive and live by eating the bark. Chayahu is another name, where you peel off the bark of the cottonwood, and it was used as a medicine. The bark was made into a tea, kind of like a red willow. Chanshasha has the same properties as the cottonwood tree. So if you know about chanshasha, we use that in our pipes mix, and it's a medicine, but you can also use it for a tea, or if you have body aches, and it's the same thing with a cottonwood. It used to be used to make a tea, and a woman had menstrual cramps. It would relieve the pain. If you had body aches, if you had a fever, the bark of the cottonwood tree would relieve those pains. And we also used to make bread with it. You grind up the bark, and it could be used to make bread. It was added to thicken soup and stew. So it was a food to us in the Shokawaka, the horses, but it was also a medicine. So you could chew the bark if you had a toothache and the outer bark, and it would relieve that toothache as well. Chayahu is a name when, like I said, when it came from a time when we used it to feed our horses in harsh winter times. There's another name, Chaha Yuslata, is also referred to. Yuslata is to take the bark off in Dakota. One thing I learned in life is that there's many different names for things, not just one. A lot of times we get stuck into one word, but I think a lot of it is the common man knowledge and sacred knowledge, because we have a sacred language that those with spiritual gifts only they understand. And I think a lot of it is, this is it's an old language or an ancient language. Our language is very ancient, going back to before the dinosaur days. When the white buffalo calf woman came, she also brought us more complex words to our language. And that was a time when the giant beasts roamed the earth, they told me. And the name for the cottonwood is wakinyan, and that refers to the little saplings. In springtime, we would eat the little saplings, and it would give us nourishment to our body. So that was another benefit of it. The cottonwood in Sundance is called Chawaka, sacred tree. We use it, like I mentioned, that our spirit is from the star world, and within the branch of the cottonwood is a star shape. We used to build our Sundance lodges out of the cottonwood, the outside shade area. It would be 16 poles and then 12 across, 28. Then we would use the cottonwood inside the Sundance arbor, which is just a big altar. We create a big altar on the earth, and the cottonwood is the center of the altar. Some things about the cottonwood that probably the Washichu, the non-native, don't understand is that cottonwood attracts water. At Sundance, we use the cottonwood because the Wakia Oyate, the thunder, bring water. So there's a relationship that the thunder brings water, the cottonwood brings water as well. And it'll find water. So in the cities, you plant a cottonwood close to your house or areas, its roots are going to go into the water system because it attracts water. So probably why non-natives just see it as a pest tree. The cottonwood tree to us is the only tree that has a fork in it, a natural crutch. That's why we use it to build that arbor for Sundance. The crutch, and we lay the poles in the crutch of the cottonwood. The crutch we call chanyuze. Chanyuze is the crutch, the fork in the cottonwood tree that looks like this. cottonwood tree is the only tree that will send its roots to heal another tree when it's sick. And that's another reason why we consider it wakan, sacred. The leaves, champa, is what we leave those intact. You can use, yeah, like I said, you can make it, but it's also a wasnapi or a wosnapi. Wasnapi is something that we burn as an offering. In ceremony, when you want to have a good outcome for yourself, you burn cottonwood and offer it to the creator, to those spirits that you want to come.
Hey, Jim,
The
this
leaves
is Maggie. I'm
on
sorry.
the cottonwood tree we call cha. Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me? You're kind of cutting out a little bit, so I wonder
Yeah.
if you turn off your video, if that might help, so we can hear your voice better.
I live in an area that on a mountain in I actually have a T-Mobile, it's cutting out. It said. I'm
Sorry, I
gonna
didn't
log
wanna
back
interrupt
in and see if that corrects it, okay?
Okay, that sounds good.
No? No?
Okay,
Am I back in?
I can hear you and see you now.
Okay.
It seems better.
Okay.
Okay, let's try again. Oh, I think you froze up now. Okay, well, we're having some technical difficulties here, so I'm going to connect with Jim by phone. Michaela, would you want to maybe talk a little bit about the things you were going to talk about in your section, and then I'm going to connect with Jim.
Sure, I can do that. So let me just share my screen again. Whoops, wrong one. Let's see here. Okay. Well, oh, I was loving everything that Jim was saying though. And we have a lot of slides here, so don't look, just kidding. So just sort of how our elder Jim was saying earlier, the Cottonwoods have a bunch of gifts between medicinal and edible gifts. Before, Jim had mentioned a little bit about how the bark is edible, and so are the shoots, and that bark contains a lot of medicine known as salicin. And so our bodies, when we ingest salicin, turns it into salicylic acid, which a lot of you have probably heard of, which is just a fancy name for truly aspirin. And so aspirin started from cottonwood trees, which is a really, I think that's a powerful thing, that most of our modern medicine or Western medicine, they already started from all of our plants. And so in our work, we really like to talk more about medicinal and edible gifts of our plant relatives so that we can return to those teachings and return to those ways. Yes. So before I go into any sort of medicine making, I just want to start off by saying that I am really young and I'm a learner. And Maggie really wanted all of us, as we are on this journey learning, to be able to speak a little bit more about the knowledge that we've gained. And one of those pieces of knowledge that we've gained and have grown up with is harvesting protocols. So when we're going out, and before Maggie mentioned about our plant relatives, they're our relatives. In our language, we have this saying, "Midakuye oyapsi." We're all my relations, we're all relatives. And because that is our life way, it's really important for us to live in a good way and live in reciprocity with our plant relatives. And part of that is making sure that when we're harvesting, we're giving back and we're giving our thanks. We're putting our chashasha down, our tobacco down, singing our songs. And a general rule of thumb that's really good to follow is to only harvest 1/3 of what is there, so that you're leaving all of that medicine and that food there for other animal and insect kin. And just how Jim was saying, the inner bark of the wakinyan, or the cottonwoods, is edible. And but between the outer layer of bark and the actual wood is that edible layer, and it's also called the cambium layer of a tree. And it's only about a few millimeters thick, but it's packed with food and medicine, like starches and vitamins and minerals, fiber, and even a little bit of sugar. But before we go into how to harvest the inner bark of the wakinyan, or the cottonwood, I just want to let everyone know, if you don't know already, but that inner layer of bark is what's called the cambium of a tree. And the cambium of a tree is where the nutrients are transported up from the roots and into the leaves. And so really, without the cambium, or if the cambium is exposed around the entire tree, a tree can quickly starve. So it's really recommended, and it could even die, truly, if it goes around the whole entire tree. But it's recommended that we only harvest from cottonwood trees if we're in an emergency setting. So Jim said earlier that a lot of times we would harvest if we were having a really hard winter, or if it was a time of famine, things like that. But if you're going to harvest from the cottonwood, try to do that, only from trees that have already fallen down, or cottonwood trees that are going to be removed in the future. And so how you harvest the inner bark, step one, you're going to take an axe, or really any tool of your liking, and you're going to gently chop away at that larger bark on the outside until that lighter color inner layer of bark, or the cambium, is exposed. And once you get to that layer, you're going to shave or peel that inner layer from the tree, making sure to really just take vertical portions. If you're going to harvest from a tree, you're going to want to only harvest like this big of a section, and vertically, so down. And then after you've harvested that inner bark, you can either just eat those strips raw, or you can dry them over a fire later. And if you dry them, you can grind them up into a fine powder, and you can add them into soups and stews. Like Jim said, you can even bake with it, make bread. And another thing that you can do with cottonwood bark is chew it. And Jim already said all of this, so I'm just reiterating it to get it into our brains. But you can chew it for toothaches. You can also make a tea, or a lot of times you'll see words like decoctions in medicine making, things like that. And there's a slight difference between an infusion and decoction, but really they're just general terms for tea. An infusion is when you're trying to extract those medicines by letting the herb or plant material sit in the hot water for at least 15 minutes, oftentimes enclosed by a cover. So maybe think about something like a teapot with a cover, or a coffee press. But what you gonna want to do with more tough, fibrous, root-like medicines like bark or berries, roots, or mushrooms is do what they call decoction, which is when you're going to be extracting that medicine by boiling water and the herbs together, or when that heat is applied constantly and continually. And oftentimes you'll take 2/3 part water, 1/3 part herb, bark, root, etc. Bring that to a boil and let it simmer for 15 minutes to 3 hours. Some folks do it overnight. And that's really gonna get the real good medicine out of those tougher plant materials. So that is just a little bit more about how you would use the bark. But Maggie, do we want to hand it back over to Jim, or should I go into the buds?
Yeah, I think Jim is back and ready to continue. So sorry about that interruption. And thanks, Michaela, for swooping in and sharing a little bit about your piece as well. So Jim, if you're ready, we can give this another shot with your video and audio and let you continue talking to us about the role of the cottonwood tree in our ceremonies.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Little time delay. I live on a top of a mountain in the Black Hills, the outer foothills of the Black Hills, and my internet service isn't that good, but I have a that we use for Zoom and stuff like that, but I don't know how far I need to go back. I was talking about chawaka, which is the other name for the cottonwood tree. And I mentioned that in the branches is a star. And the leaves, I started talking about the leaves, wakpe. We call the leaves sacred leaves. If you take the leaves and you fold them up, 3 folds of a teepee is a star, like that forms a star, kind of like a triangle shape. That's a star. The leaves in the wind, they're calming to spirits, and they will sit and stay. In the Sundance, we call the spirits to come and carry our prayers. There's we call the thunder beings because they fly above, higher than the eagle, and we use the cottonwood tree to connect Mother Earth and our ancestors in the star world up above. And so that's one reason why we use it. The leaves in other places, like sometimes at home we build a shade. We're going to have a feast outside, and we'll take cottonwood trees and cover the wapaza. We'll cover that shade. And they say that's so, when we do that and we have a feast, if our relatives come and stay, the sound of the leaves rattling in the wind, they're going to come and sit with us and stay with us while we eat and while we visit and laugh and enjoy each other's company. That's one of the powers of the leaves, the way they call it wakewaka. The leaves are actually like a gourd. There's a certain gourd we make for certain ceremonies, but the sound that the gourd makes is actually replicating the sound that the leaves of the cottonwood make in the wind when the wind blows. At Sundance, we burn cedar. The cedar is for spirits. Sometimes people think it's a smudge, but it's not. The cedar is a wosnapi. Wosnapi is an offering. The scent of cedar spirits love. One of my first teachers was a man named Archie Fire, and that's how he explained it to me about cedar, that spirits love the smell of cedar, so we burn it. If we get eagle feathers, you want to cleanse before you use your eagle feathers. We burn cedar and we smudge them with it. We offer the smoke cedar, but cedar is with burning the cottonwood tree. It's an offering. They attract both positive and negative energy. So along with that, we burn sage to keep back the negative. It's the same thing at Sundance. All this, we lay sage out along the border of the Sundance to keep the negative energy that's going to come, because we only want positive things to happen. Like I said, that the first shape of a star is a triangle, or the bottom of a teepee. When the three poles are put together, stars in the leaves and the cottonwood, we put it in the ground, we replant it so it'll have new life, just like we want new life through prayers. Again, I mentioned that it attracts water. It's mini means me, mie, miecha, midakiapi, me, myself. Ni is life. So our word for water is, it gives me life. Mini. And that's the power of a cottonwood. It attracts water, and the water gives us life. So it's kind of hard to explain this concept of Kapemini P. Kapemini P is like what they call like a vortex. It's what's on Earth is above in the star world. The cottonwood tree, like I said, the crutch is a cha yuze. When we pray, we offer our arms up like this. Yugata, we call this, because we become like a cottonwood tree on the earth. The trunk is our body, our arms are the branches, the crutch of the cottonwood tree. In our feet is a hole in our feet when we stand on Mother Earth. In our palms is a hole in our palms. So we reach up like the cottonwood tree in prayer, and we send our prayers out of a palm of our hand, because we don't have to say our prayers out loud. We can think them in our mind. In a Sundance ceremony, the trunk and the cottonwood tree connects Mother Earth in the star world above, just like the teepee does. We do the same thing. The cottonwood tree becomes a ka, a life vein. A life vein, a ka, is like the root of a plant. That's a ka. It connects Mother Earth with what's above Mother Earth. When we tie teepee poles, we lace them together, lash them together. The rope that hangs down on the inside, that's a ka, a life vein. So the cottonwood tree in the Sundance becomes a ka. It connects Mother Earth and the star world where our ancestors are. We become like the cottonwood tree. We become with our arms up as we offer our prayers. We become like the cottonwood tree, and our bodies are a life vein that connects Mother Earth and the star world above. We say that what's done here on earth is also done in the spirit world, nahi yata, wanahi yata, and by our ancestors. You know, what I've shared doesn't even include everything, but I just try to relate that to we are, like I said, our spirit is from the stars, and the cottonwood tree is a star in itself. Another meaning for the crutch in the cottonwood tree is the cottonwood tree represents balance. One is the good road, the other is the not good road. And these are the choices we have in life. Otana is the straight, the good road. Wiwila Wabluska is one name for that other road, or dysfunctional road in life. The cottonwood tree represents that. As the crutch in the cottonwood, as it goes up top, it makes it more difficult to go back and forth between good and bad. So they used to say, you know, make your choice well. As we age, we learn that, you know, sometimes we learn that it's better to stay on that good road because it's harder to go back and forth, especially as you get older and that crutch widens. One reason we say the cottonwood tree, we call it trunk, those that are sacred, the potential to take life and give life is what we call sacred. And that's it within the cottonwood tree. The cottonwood tree represents balance on earth. The one symbol for thunder is at the top is that. Then we have a zigzag line. Then again on the bottom is like that. And that's a symbol for thunder. If you ever seen that symbol, that's what also the cottonwood tree attracts the thunder beings. And that's why we build a nest for them to come roost. Like I said, in Sundance, the eagle, everybody believes the eagle carries our prayers, but the thunder beings carry them higher. the thunder beings carry them directly to the creator. So we call the thunder. We build that nest in the tree. We believe, and I seen this thing recently, an article in the Science, where they believe that thunder triggered the growth of everything on Earth. In springtime, when the thunder returns, we believe that when the young thunder returns, it strikes the ground, and that awakens creation. With the creation, the awakening of creation, the thunder in Sundance represents new life for those we pray for, new lives for ourselves, new life, and new life for all creation. And that's the whole purpose of the Sundance ceremony, to bring water as well. And the cottonwood, like I said, attracts water. It attracts the thunder beings. The cottonwood channels our prayers up above. I got some notes here I just kind of made. Aside from the traditional aspect, we all know that we're experiencing climate change, and the contributions that trees make to the air we breathe with oxygen and nitrogen and other things. The global warming, we're poisoning our environment. We cut down these trees. Here in the Black Hills, all these people are complaining because the Forest Service, who manages the forest here, have reduced the amount of trees that they can cut down. So they shut down. There's a lot of sawmills in the Black Hills, and they're in different areas. They shut down one, I think it's in Hill City or something like that, and different places too. And because the Forest Service has cut back on harvesting of trees. Right now, everybody all over the world is trying to plant trees, but it's kind of late. Trees take, hundreds of years, some of them. And hopefully we'll quit cutting trees down and respect the value of them and their contribution to us. We're told to live in harmony with and in peace with our environment. Whoa, that's what that means, to live in peace. And that's our ultimate name. The one that spoke on the benefits of the cottonwood. We were told to only take what you need in life and take nothing more. We're on a spiritual journey here. The difference between us and Maza Washichuna Kawachi, the white man or colonialized thinking is to gain material things, but we're on a spiritual journey, and we know that we can't take those material things with us. They said respect earth, and only take what you need in life. The same thing when we harvest, kind of makes me sad because too, we take the cottonwood tree in between rows every year. They got 187. You think about that, that's 187 trees, cottonwood trees. That's not counting those that build the arbor every year out of cottonwood. How many, I think sometimes time where they're already being protected. You know, people don't want you to come onto their land and just take it. You have to get permission. And some people will only let you, one person come and harvest a tree yearly. So, you know, even our ceremonies have an impact on the cottonwood tree. And I would think that maybe one day we'll all be able to pray together at Sundance, because there was one Sundance in the beginning. There was only one, but we become like the non-native, where we can't even pray together anymore. You go in those small towns and there's 10, 20 churches, and we're becoming like that. That's kind of it, and the highlights. If anybody has any questions, I started my spiritual journey in the 1970s. I lost a brother who pledged to Sundance. Because of that, my parents came to me and asked me to fulfill the Sundance pledge, and I said no. Then I thought about it, and I thought, oh, I'll honor my brother and fulfill his pledge. So I didn't know anything. Then I knew very little as a teenager, and but I was fortunate that I had older men like Archie Fire and Virgil Standing Elk and Daryl Standing Elk and my uncles and grandfathers were all still alive then, and they helped me. And in life, we call that ichumpi, and we learn waonspena, we learn our traditions. Ichumpi is doing, and hopefully through learning and doing, we gain enlightenment. And with enlightenment, hopefully, we'll gain wisdom in life. So hopefully, I think I covered everything. I made notes on the highlights. I learned there's more than one way in life, and to keep an open mind, and that even within our nation, each tioshpaya, each clan, each family, they have their teachings. They may be different. It doesn't mean they're wrong. So.
Oh, wash day.
I don't know. Any questions or?
Thank you so much. I think there's a little bit of a time delay, but oh my gosh, those were beautiful, beautiful teachings. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I learned so many new things that I didn't know about. That I didn't know about before, like the sound that the cottonwood trees make, that the gourds are replicating that in our ceremonies. I didn't know that. So thank you so much. If you want to hang out for a little while, I think we're going to have Keely and some other of the staff talk a little bit more about some other gifts of the cottonwood tree, and then we can have some time, a little bit of time at the end for questions. So I'll let you guys take it away, Keely or Michela, whoever's up next.
Hello again, everyone. I just want to give my personal thank you to Jim for sharing his teachings. I was very humbled when elders can share a Hongsbea teaching with us. I'm still learning too, and this has been a really great project for me to learn even more about cottonwoods and not just about the gifts they give to us as human beings, but also to our greater environment and to our animal relatives as well. But before I talk a little bit more about that, I just wanted to quickly I think it's important to go over what the defining features are of cottonwoods. So like Jim mentioned, they grow near rivers and creeks and near waterways, and even attract water, like he was saying, was something I learned. They have a dark gray and thickly deep, kind of interwoven looking ridged bark. It's very noticeable. Teardrop shaped leaves that kind of have a toothy edge and a flat stem. They can get between 75 to 100 feet tall during the warm weather seasons, and they grow the cotton-like fluffy white seeds from which they get their English name. They also have sticky kind of buds that they produce, and me and Michelle will both talk a little bit more about those as well. So the gifts they give to our animal relatives are many. Another identifying feature of cottonwoods is if you see an eagle's nest in them, they are a great place for them to perch as they're along waterways. And because they're such a tall tree, it's a great vantage point for them to hunt and to have their nests. So this is a really special picture here. It's actually from Wakan Tipi. And to us on our team, that's a really good sign that Wakan Tipi as a place, as the sacred site, is healing. The environment is healing, you know, it's being restored. And so the fact that the eagles have come back to nest in the cottonwoods on the site, we're really thankful for. So other animals use cottonwoods like trapa, the beaver, and tachtra, the deer. They use it as a food source. At one point, when cottonwoods lined all of our rivers and were plentiful, they were a great food source for these animal relatives. Nowadays, with less and less cottonwoods, with our streams and rivers being developed and channeled and removing those plant relatives, these animals can cause a little bit of harm to the cottonwoods if they overgraze. But it's one more reason why we just benefit from having more cottonwoods along our rivers. So a couple other animal relatives are fish species. Many fish species benefit from cottonwoods as they overlook the waterways. They provide shade, which can help cool the water. They also help prevent erosion, so keeping the water clear. That benefits our fish species. Another really cool thing is bees, both native solitary bees and bees that live in hives, communities. They can make their own kind of medicine called propolis from a sticky resin collected from the buds of the tree that we had a picture of earlier. They mix it with wax and use it to seal their hives to keep out any sort of moisture. And the resin also has antimicrobial properties. So it's been observed that when hives are sick, the bees will collect more resin from the trees to use to help heal themselves. So another great thing that cottonwoods do is that they heal the earth. And this is important to think about at a site like Wakan Tipi because it was a polluted site for so long. And the fact that we have cottonwoods there is just reassuring that they can help heal the earth. So the technical term for this kind of great gift that cottonwoods have is called phytoremediation. And it's basically a green technology which uses plants for the removal, degradation, or containment of contaminants. These can be things like heavy metals to man-made chemicals like pesticides and solvents. They also, so what happens is they take up and absorb those chemicals and contaminants within their tissues, and that way they clean the surrounding soil. Because this is a low-tech alternative too, it also cuts down on a lot of costs and causes less environmental disturbance to the area than is associated with traditional cleanup techniques, which would require removing all of the earth, transporting it somewhere else to be cleaned, or installing physical barriers in the ground to try to keep any sort of contamination. Cottonwoods are just naturally good at healing the land. They also prevent the movement of chemicals off-site from around them due to natural processes like wind, rain, or groundwater flow. So why are cottonwoods good as phytoremediators? We've mentioned a lot of the features of them, but they have an extensive root system. They go anywhere from 4 to 20 feet deep below the ground. They also have a really high water uptake. A fully grown cottonwood uses up to 50 to 200 gallons of water per day. They have an extremely high rapid growth and high biomass production. It's actually the fastest growing native tree species in North America. And they're also really hardy. So they have a really high tolerance to adverse conditions like pollution from heavy metals and also seasonal flooding and things like that. Because they are a floodplain species, like I mentioned before, they can prevent erosion of soil into our rivers, can help with river and water clarity, but also the infiltration of any sort of contaminated soil by keeping it in place. So they uptake heavy metals like zinc and cadmium in their foliage, and nickel, lead, copper, and chromium in their roots. And then I just kind of quickly wanted to reference this case study about cottonwoods. It was conducted in 1996 by the US Geological Service in partnership with the Air Force over 7 years. And they wanted to know if planting cottonwood trees around this Air Force base in Texas that was contaminated with a man-made chemical called TCE for short, which is used in the manufacturing of airplane parts. They wanted to know if cottonwood trees would help with the remediation of that chemical. And it turns out that they very much did. Cottonwoods have a symbiotic relationship with fungi and microorganisms in the soil. They give those organisms sugars and other natural organic compounds. And in turn, those microorganisms can help break down chemicals like TCE. The trees were also able to uptake those chemicals and convert them and break them down within the tree itself. So this was just a great example showing a real life scenario of how beneficial cottonwoods are to the ecosystem, and also keeping those contaminants in place and on that site from reaching any sort of nearby waterway.
Thank you so much, Keely. I think I will try to get us through the next section a little quick here. We were able to talk a little bit about harvesting and only taking what you need, talking about the inner bark, harvesting the inner bark, but making sure really, this would be done in an emergency situation. And yeah, making teas or decoctions with the bark to treat headaches, menstrual cramps, fevers. But another really beautiful gift of the cottonwood tree are the buds. And like both Keely and Jim said, the buds are really medicinal. So those buds contain that compound called salicin, which our body breaks down into salicylic acid. And that yellow sticky resin is a wonderful decongestant chest rub if you're able to make one. And it's also great in steam. So if you were to put some cotton buds in a pot, and if you had a really bad cold or a lot of congestion, to use that steam to get rid of that sickness or to pull it out of your body. You can also make an infused oil from the buds that will reduce pain and inflammation, and it's really great and excellent for sore muscles and joint pain. So today I'm going to share a little bit of my knowledge that I have about how to make a cottonwood bud salve. And so it's really recommended or the best time to harvest the buds of the cottonwood tree is around February, but it really depends on your location and the weather that season. But I always tend to do it around mid-February. And because the buds will become the new year's next leaves, it's really important to be mindful and to also only ever take what you need, like our elder Jim said. So a really great example for sustainably harvesting the buds would be to go out after a windstorm. Because a lot of times they'll just fall off the tree and those beautiful resinous buds will be all over the floor and ready to go. And so to make a salve, step one is you want to make an infused oil. And so what you're going to do is get a clean glass jar, like a mason jar, and you're going to fill it up with all of the buds that you've harvested. And you're going to, once it's completely full, you're going to fill that jar up with extra virgin olive oil, but really any oil that you have around the house will work, like sunflower oil, for example, is another good one, coconut oil. And you're going to want to try to make sure that there's not any air bubbles in there. Otherwise, your oil, it can go bad. So you can just take a spoon and sort of lift it up and get rid of any of those air bubbles. And once you have your jar completely full with the oil, you can cover it. And if you're using dried buds, so if you harvest your buds and you let them dry for a little bit, you're going to take your mason jar and put it in a cool location, like your basement or anywhere out of direct sunlight. But if you're using fresh buds, you're going to put it in a warm location. So think your windowsill or near the heater, but it can be in direct light. And in order to get all of that medicine out of those buds, you're going to let them sit in that oil in the jar for about 4 to 6 weeks. And if, for example, you really want that medicine, you have a bad cold, you want to make that chest rub, or if you're having some joint pain or anything like that, and you just can't wait those 6 weeks, you can make an infused oil in a crock pot or in a double boiler. A double boiler is just like a bowl over a pot of boiling water. And so you're going to place your fresh or dry herbs into the crock pot, and you can fully cover the herbs with oil. You can do two things, really. You can put your buds in the crock pot and pour oil in there, or you can actually put them in your jar and just allow the crock pot to heat up the jar. So you're going to gently heat those herbs or those buds and the oil over a really low heat. So like the lowest setting on your crock pot. And after about 1 to 8 hours, you can remove it and let it cool, strain it, and put that oil into your jar. And once your oil is done, whether you've waited that 4 to 6 weeks or whether you put it in the crock pot, your next step is going to be to strain it. And so you're going to strain it with a cheesecloth. But I've also had a couple of aunties tell me that if you don't have a cheesecloth, you can use a really beaten up t-shirt, but you're just maybe not going to get as much of that oil out, but it will work. And then you're going to take a pot and put it on your stove or a hot plate. And what makes a salve is combining the oil with beeswax. And so you're going to get some beeswax. I usually get mine in pellet forms from the co-ops near and around us, but you could just get regular beeswax in a chunk and either chop it up real finely, grate it, shave it, whatever, however you like. And then you're going to combine the oil and the beeswax in your pot and gently melt it until it's all incorporated. You want to make sure not to boil it, not to get it at a really high temperature, because otherwise that medicine can evaporate out. And then once you've combined it, you're done. And so all you have to do is let it cool a little bit, or put it in your containers, let it cool, cover it up, label it, and then you have your own cottonwood bud salve. And so those are just a few gifts of the buds and the bark, whether it's medicine or food. Truly, our cottonwoods, they give us so much and they provide so much. And they provide so much not just for us, but for our animal kin, our winged relatives, pollinators, like Keely said, the water, really just everyone, And here's just a little picture of what Jim was talking about earlier about you can take the wakan, or the leaves of the cottonwood, and make those teepees. And you see that triangle up here, or where that sort of teepee flap would be. That's what Jim was talking about for the star, I think. And so that's my section. I went through it a little quick, but I hope that it was good. And so Sam, our coworker Sam, can probably touch on this next section. I know we only have about 5 or so minutes left officially, but if we have a lot of questions and if you want to stick around and just talk a little bit, we'll be here. So Sam, do you want to talk a little bit more about these?
Sure. Thank you so much, Michaela. I think how I would like to do things as we're coming up on 7:30 is that I would love for folks, if you have questions, Chelsea and I think it was Lauren, you already wrote some great questions in the chat, and I would love to address those. But please, any and all questions, you can enter those into the chat. And then the stuff you see up on your screen are really more, I think, some food for thought questions that we have as in our work. So the one you see up in front of you right now addresses the question that I think Maggie mentioned right at the beginning, and actually was really one of the driving factors for why we decided we wanted to have this webinar, is that we have heard a lot of people talk about cottonwoods as an undesirable tree. So I wanted to write a couple things down here. You know, you can see that the advantages of the cottonwood tree in some regards might be disadvantages depending on your perspective. So that those tall tree canopies mean that more limbs fall often in highly residential areas. That's not something that people are seeking. Similarly, I know many of you might have allergies and probably saw the many cottonwood seeds throughout the Twin Cities this past spring. Cottonwoods naturally want to spread. A single tree can produce up to 25 million seeds. So cottonwoods want to grow their presence wherever they are at. I think to us, that sentence down at the bottom is sort of the bottom line, right? That cottonwoods are the anchor of the floodplain forest. They provide these immeasurable values, both as habitat to birds and other relatives, as shade for many ground dwelling species, as temperature regulators. So I think we all have a lot of respect, even if we're just talking from a purely ecological perspective. We have a lot of respect for the values that cottonwoods provide. And Michaela, if you could go on to my next slide there. So this next question, I think Jim actually beat me to it too. But in this, the point of his talk where he was speaking about how we see trees as a product, right? How we harvest them for timber, how they're used in pulp. Some trees are even used for biomass, right? And for fuel production. What you see here represented in these slides are the ways in which cottonwoods in particular have been tinkered with by academics in our Western society to maximize some of those naturally occurring gifts that they provide. And I think this poses yet another ethical question for us, which is, I think like Jim sort of mentioned as well, right, of which road do we want to choose, right? If we have this beautiful knowledge about what gifts these plants bring, the way that these plants doctor the earth, it's our choice to determine whether to respect that from afar or to exploit it. And so I think what you see here on the screen is that we've already chosen the path of exploitation in many ways. I think what we're trying to do, and what many other people who we haven't mentioned here are working really, really hard to do, is we are trying to get away from that exploitative mindset and sort of respect the processes that these trees do, right? The plants that doctor the earth is something that was brought up by Hope Flanagan from Dream of Wild Health this past spring. I would really encourage folks to view any of their past webinars on their YouTube page. Hope has been a guest at some of our past events, but she does a really wonderful job of talking about not only cottonwoods, but other plants that have some of these beautiful, beautiful, powerful qualities. So Michaela, if you want to go on to the next one too. I think I'll use this slide to address the question that was brought up about forever chemicals. PFAs here on the east side. So, the extent to which cottonwoods can act as phytoremediators is pretty astounding. Obviously, the phytoremediation that a cottonwood provides will be on a longer time scale than more intensive remediation techniques like removing soil or other sort of wholesale just replacing parts of an ecosystem. But you can see that even the properties that cottonwoods have leave permanent alterations on a polluted landscape. So as Keely mentioned, a lot of those heavy metals, they're not degraded or transformed the best, and I don't even want to say the best that cottonwoods could do, because what cottonwoods do is incredible, right? But there's only so much that they can do to right the wrongs that we have input into this earth. So specifically, I had to do a little flash chemistry lesson for myself. There is less research on PFAs in particular than on many other contaminants. PFAs with their carbon bonds are particularly difficult to break down or break up. So from what I've read, it seems that they would have a greater potential for uptake into deciduous trees, particularly trees that have wide-reaching root systems or access to take up a lot of water. Those would do a better job of, at the very least, binding, isolating, or sort of fixing those PFAs in place. So, but as with most things, we would need more research to determine exactly how much our plant relatives could do to, as we said before, sort of right the wrongs that we've created. So go ahead, Michelle, with the next one. Yeah, so this next question is a tough one. I think we can view it in a number of ways. So officially, Wakantipi is a public space. It is currently owned by the city of St. Paul. And so we are not allowed to encourage anybody to harvest on public lands such as these. Ethically, from the perspective of should one harvest at Wakantipi, I think we also have the considerations of this place as a sacred site and as a site that has in particular suffered decades of trauma and destruction. So what you see at a site like Wakantipi is plants thriving after years and years of hard work. What you're seeing is recovery. So I think treating this space as a site for recovery, if nothing else, is really, really valuable. And particularly for non-native folks like myself, I think keeping in mind the harvesting protocols that Michelle so wonderfully reminded us of. I think that is first and foremost the way that a non-native person should approach any question of harvesting, whether it's cottonwoods or really any other gift that our earth provides. Lastly, I'll say that if you want the dirty, pun intended, the dirty details of Wakantipi, recent soil tests have indicated that toxicity levels are low enough that this would not be considered a hazardous waste site. But that being said, there are still levels of arsenic, mercury, and a number of other metals that are impacting the plants in that area. So these last questions, I don't want to spend too much time on. If anything, I would encourage people, I will tell you that this past week, we purchased this book called Earth Repair, which is meant to be a grassroots guide, a community-based guide to approaching phytoremediation. So if you don't have a PhD, if you don't have access to academic institutions, there are still so many ways where you can gain some of this knowledge. And again, the best way to gain knowledge is with community. So I would encourage any of you, if you're curious about phytoremediation at your home, in your community, reach out to us because we would love to co-learn with you. That last slide I had up, you don't need to go back to it, Michelle, but that last slide was talking about a site assessment that you can do, which is almost like a visual eye test. So if you're wondering where it might be safe to harvest, take visual clues from how the other relatives are living and existing in a space, where water is flowing. There's different ways that we can listen and we can observe what's going on around us to make more informed decisions on whether or not we want to harvest in a given area. So I'll end with that. I'm going to answer Lauren's question in the chat. I'm going to mute myself, but we would love to hear any and all questions that people have.
So I cannot see the chat, but Maggie, if you could go through the chat and maybe pick a couple questions that we can close off on, I think that'd be great. And if I know that we're over 7:30, so if you have to go, thank you so much for coming. It was a little rocky, but I learned so much and I had such a wonderful time. Yeah. So Maggie, if there are any couple questions that speak to you, pop out to you that maybe we could answer or Jim could answer. Also, Jim, you're on mute again. Just letting you know.
Yeah, so I think all of the questions that are in the chat have been answered except for who authored that book you were just talking about, Sam. Oh, and Sam just dropped it in the chat. So the author of the book Earth Repair is in the chat. So if anybody has any other questions for any of our presenters, you can drop them in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, I know we're a little bit over time. So unless there are questions, we could also just kind of wrap up, or if you have any final words for us, Jim, that would be great too.
You talked about using it as a medicine. You can take the bark and a little sage and boil it, make a tea, and it's a cure for, not a cure, but relieves the pain of arthritis. We spoke about infusion. The best to infuse with is grapeseed oil that's not scented. It's not as thick and oily, and it's excellent for picking up the properties of infusion in the infusion process. It makes skin medicine from different plants that we harvest. Just to say what I was taught is you go out and harvest medicine. The first four you put tobacco down on four sides. Then after the first four you cut, you could just cut at will, and don't, like I said, only take what you need is what we were taught. And if you're drying and we turn our medicines upside down and we don't wash them, especially roots. If you wash them, you take away their power. So we leave them natural. Just a few things about harvesting medicines.
I like that about leaving them natural. I sometimes when you Google stuff about how to go foraging and everything, they're always had those directions about washing all these plants really good. And I always leave them natural, but it's good to hear from our elder here, Jim, that's a good way to do it. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for all of the knowledge you gave us tonight and shared with our community here. And I'm so honored by that. And I'm so honored that all of you joined us tonight as well. So if there are no other questions, just thanks everybody. And I hope everyone has a great night.
Doksha.
Doksha.